My husband Stuart looked me dead in the eyes one evening and said, "Lorraine, you wouldn't last 6 months without me. You don't even know how to balance a checkbook." He said it the way you'd say something obvious, like pointing out that the sky was gray in November. He wasn't yelling. He was almost calm about it, which was somehow worse. I was 61 years old, standing in my own kitchen, holding a dish towel, and my husband of 34 years had just told me I was incapable of surviving without him. I didn't say anything back. I turned to the sink and kept washing the pot I'd been washing. My hands were shaking, but I kept scrubbing. That was the night I stopped being afraid of leaving. People ask me sometimes how I stayed so long. 34 years is a long time. I understand why they ask. What they don't understand is how it happens gradually. The way a house settles. You don't notice one crack in the foundation. You notice it years later when the whole wall has shifted. Stuart wasn't always cruel. In the beginning, he was charming. He had this confidence about him, the kind that makes you feel safe when you're young and don't yet know the difference between a man who is confident and a man who simply needs to be the most important person in every room. We met in Hamilton, Ontario, at a friend's housewarming party. I was 27. He was 32. He brought me a glass of wine without me asking, and told me I had the kind of face that made people feel at ease. I thought that was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me. We married the following year. I had a part-time bookkeeping job at a printing company. Stuart had just been promoted at his firm, and when I got pregnant with our daughter Cynthia, he said it made more sense for me to stay home. "You'll be better at that than any daycare," he said. "You're a natural." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. What I didn't understand then was that every decision we made together, or what I thought was together, was actually just Stuart deciding, and me agreeing. I gave up the bookkeeping. I gave up the evening pottery class I loved. I gave up weekend trips with my friend Noelle because Stuart felt they were a waste of money. Small surrenders, one after another, until I looked up one day and didn't quite recognize the shape of my own life. The money was always his department. That's how he put it. "The money is my department, Lorraine. You worry about the house." He gave me a household allowance, an actual allowance, like I was 12 years old, and I had to justify every dollar over that amount. Once I bought a winter coat on sale for $65 and he brought it up for 3 weeks. Do you know what $65 compounds to over 10 years, Lorraine? I wanted to say, do you know what 34 years of cooking your dinners and raising your children and ironing your shirts compounds to? But I didn't. I just put the coat in the back of the closet. Our son Brendan was born 3 years after Cynthia. He's a sweet man, my Brendan. He has my eyes and, thank God, not his father's temperament. Cynthia takes after Stuart a bit more. She's sharp, ambitious, but she has a warmth to her that Stuart never had. I am proud of both of them more than words can do justice. It was Cynthia who first said it out loud. She was visiting from Vancouver with her husband Kevin, and Stuart had been particularly dismissive that weekend. He'd interrupted me 4 times at dinner to correct things I'd said, small things. The year something happened, the name of a street. Things that didn't matter. Kevin had gone quiet and uncomfortable. Cynthia had gone very still. After Stuart went to bed, Cynthia sat with me at the kitchen table with 2 cups of tea and said, "Mom, how long has he been like this?" I tried to brush it off. "He's just tired." She shook her head. "Mom, he talked to you tonight like you were staff." I looked down at my tea. I didn't say anything for a long time. Then I said, "He's always been like this. I think I just stopped noticing." That was the summer I was 59. It took 2 more years before I finally left. The last straw wasn't dramatic. That's what surprises people. They expect a big scene, something cinematic. But the last straw was a Tuesday afternoon in March, when I had signed up for a community college course, a basic business fundamentals class, just 8 weeks, 2 evenings a week. I'd been thinking about it for months. I was excited about it the way I hadn't been excited about anything in years. I told Stuart over dinner. He looked up from his plate. "What for?" "I thought it would be interesting. I used to do bookkeeping, you know. I thought I might, Lorraine." He said my name the way you'd say please, with that exhausted patience. "You're 61 years old. What exactly are you planning to do with a community college course?" "I don't know yet. Maybe nothing, maybe something." He shook his head and went back to his food. It's a waste of the registration fee. That night I lay awake until 3 in the morning. And something clarified for me, the way water goes still when you stop stirring it. I thought, if I stay, I will spend the rest of my life shrinking. And one day I will be gone. Not dead, just gone. And no one will notice because I'll have disappeared so slowly, so quietly, that even I won't have seen it happen. I called my friend Noelle Baxter the next morning. I hadn't spoken to her properly in almost 2 years. Stuart found reasons to make phone calls feel guilty. Noelle picked up on the second ring and said, "Lorraine, I was just thinking about you. She still sounds the same as she did when we were 30. That's the thing about your oldest friends." I said, "Noelle, I think I'm leaving Stuart." A pause. Then, "Do you need a place to stay?" I want to say right now, for anyone listening who has a friend like Noelle Baxter, you keep that person. You hold on to them. Because in the moment I needed someone to respond to the biggest sentence I had spoken in 30 years. She didn't say, "Are you sure?" or "Have you tried counseling?" or "Think about what this will mean for the family." She just asked if I needed a place to stay. I didn't take her up on it, as it turned out. I stayed in the house. We had equity, and my lawyer, a woman named Patricia Ossie, who I cannot praise enough, was very clear that I was entitled to half. Stuart had spent 34 years telling me I didn't understand money. As it turned out, Patricia Ossie understood money very well on my behalf. The divorce took 11 months. I won't pretend it was easy. Stuart cycled through several versions of himself during those months. There was the cold, dismissive Stuart who said, "Fine, if that's what you want." There was the wounded Stuart who told Brendan I was breaking up the family. There was the angry Stuart who accused me of reputchared me. Things I won't repeat here because they don't deserve the air. And there was, toward the end, the almost pleading Stuart who said, "Lorraine, you won't manage. You know that. You'll be back." I thought about that checkbook comment. I thought about the $65 coat. $65 coat. I thought about all the evenings I'd sat across a dinner table from a man who corrected me in front of my own children, who counted out my allowance like I was a household expense, who looked at my desire to take a business class and said, "What for?" I signed the papers on a Thursday morning. Patricia Ossie slid them across her desk, and I picked up the pen and my hand was absolutely steady. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Dundas, Ontario, not far from Hamilton, where I'd grown up and where Brendan still lived. The apartment had big windows that faced east, and I used to wake up in the mornings to so much light that it almost embarrassed me, like the sun was showing off. I would lie there for a few minutes before getting up and think, "This is mine. This quiet. This light. Mine." I registered for that business fundamentals course. 8 weeks, 2 evenings a week, community college. I was the oldest person in the class by a good 20 years. There was a young man named, I'll call him D, who used to help me with the spreadsheet exercises and said, I pick things up faster than most of the people his age in the room. I didn't know whether to believe him, but I appreciated the kindness. I got a B+ overall, which I was disproportionately proud of. I called Noelle to tell her. She said, "Of course you did. You always were the sharp one. Stuart just never let you know it." I'd been good with money once, before I handed that part of myself over. It came back faster than I expected. I started keeping a proper budget for the first time in my adult life. Not an allowance someone handed me, but a real accounting of what I had and what I needed. I found with some surprise that I was not particularly bad at it. Stuart had always made me feel that managing finances was some arcane skill requiring special gifts that I lacked. It turned out to be largely arithmetic and attention to detail, 2 things I had always had in abundance. I thought a lot during those first months about what I actually liked. It sounds strange to say, but at 62 years old, I had to think quite hard about what I genuinely enjoyed, separate from what I had been doing for decades because it was required of me. I liked baking. That I knew. I had always baked Christmas shortbreads and butter tarts and the occasional birthday cake, and people had always said I was good at it. I liked it in a different way than I liked most things. It felt precise and also forgiving. You follow the steps and something good comes out the other end. There was a comfort in that. I started baking more seriously in my apartment. Noelle would come for coffee and I'd have something on the counter. A lemon loaf. A batch of scones, once an elaborate cinnamon pull-apart that took me most of a Saturday. She started bringing other people. Her sister, her neighbor. her neighbor's daughter. People kept saying, "You should sell these." I'd laugh it off. I was 62. I didn't know anything about running a business. But I kept thinking about that business class, and I took another one. And then I found a small business development program through the local library, free of charge, 6 sessions, and I went to all 6. And I started to think, what if? The what if is the most dangerous and the most wonderful thought a person can have. Once it arrives, it's very hard to make it leave. I spoke to Brendan about it first. We were having Sunday dinner at his place. His wife Adrienne makes a beautiful roast chicken, and I laid it out carefully, the way I'd been planning it in my notebook for weeks. A small home-based baking operation to start. Farmers market on weekends. Maybe a commercial kitchen rental once a week. See what happened. Brendan put his fork down and looked at me for a moment. He has this way of looking at you when he's really listening, very still, very focused. He said, "Mom, how much do you need to get started?" I told him I wasn't asking for money. I had my settlement. I had been very careful with it, keeping most of it in a high-interest savings account while I figured out my next step. He said, "I know you're not asking. I'm offering." I said no, and I meant it. I needed to do this with my own money. Not because I was proud, or not only because I was proud, but because I needed to know that it was mine, all of it, with no conditions attached. No one who could look at me later and say I made this possible. I'd had enough of that. I started in the spring. Registered a small business. I called it Eastlight Baking, after those morning windows, and rented space in a commercial kitchen in Hamilton 2 mornings a week. Butter tarts were first. I know that sounds modest, but if you have never had a proper butter tart, not a grocery store one, a real one, with a slightly runny center and short pastry that holds together just enough, you don't know what you're missing. Hamilton turned out to have opinions about butter tarts. Strong ones. By the 3rd week at the farmer's market, I was selling out before noon. I added lemon loaves. Then a rotating seasonal item, apple galettes in autumn, cranberry squares at Christmas, rhubarb crostata in the spring. I kept a waiting list. I started filling corporate orders for office events. A woman named Deborah Yoon, who ran a small catering company in Hamilton, reached out and asked if I'd be interested in supplying her with baked goods on a regular basis. I said I'd think about it. I thought about it for 2 days and said yes. The 2nd year, I moved into a larger commercial kitchen full-time and hired a part-time helper, a woman fresh out of culinary school named, I'll call her T, who was faster than me at laminating dough and who became, in short order, something like a junior partner in spirit if not in title. Eastlight Baking was no longer a farmer's market hobby. It was a business. I won't pretend I understood all of it. There were months when I stared at invoices and felt like a fraud. There were weeks when the margin was thin enough to worry me, and I would take my notebook to the kitchen table late at night and go over the numbers until I found where I could adjust. I made mistakes. I ordered too much of a specialty flour once and had to move product quickly to avoid the loss. I priced one wholesale arrangement too low and had to renegotiate, which was uncomfortable. I learned from all of it, every single mistake. What I found, and what I want to say clearly, in case someone listening needs to hear it, competence is not something you have or don't have, it's something you build. Stuart had spent 34 years telling me, not always in words, sometimes just in the way he sighed, or took over, or looked at me with that faint impatience, that I was not capable. And I had believed him because I had no evidence to the contrary. I had no evidence because he had made sure I never accumulated any. Once I started accumulating evidence, I couldn't stop. By the time I was 65, Eastlight Baking had 2 full-time and 3 part-time employees. We'd outgrown the commercial kitchen, and I was in the process of leasing a small retail space in Dundas, a proper storefront, with a display case and a counter, and a little chalkboard sign out front. Noelle came to the soft opening and cried, which made me cry, which made Adrienne and Brendan cry. And my daughter Cynthia flew in from Vancouver and stood behind the counter in an apron, serving butter tarts to strangers, with this look on her face that I can only describe as radiant. She kept squeezing my hand when she thought. I wasn't paying attention. I heard about Stuart secondhand through Brendan, who heard through someone Stuart still knew from the old firm. Stuart had retired, and the retirement hadn't gone well. He'd been let go earlier than planned. Some reorganization at the company. And without work, without the structure, without an office to go to and decisions to make, and people to defer to him, he had become, by all accounts, very difficult to be around. He'd moved into a smaller condo in Ancaster. He was, I was told, not particularly happy. I thought about that for a moment when Brendan told me. I thought about the man who had told me I wouldn't last 6 months, and then I thought about my east-facing windows, and my butter tart waiting list, and the little chalkboard sign, and my daughter in her apron, and I felt, not triumph exactly, something quieter. Something that felt more like relief, like the sound of a door closing gently behind you as you step into the open air. It has been 5 years since I signed those divorce papers. I am 66 years old. Eastlight Baking has a storefront and an online order system, and a small wholesale account with 2 local restaurants. I am not rich in the way people mean when they say the word rich, but I am solvent, and I am purposeful, and I wake up to those east-facing windows every morning and feel something I don't have a perfect word for. A compound interest of small good things, accumulating daily, belonging only to me. My granddaughter Cynthia and Kevin's little girl Marguerite came to visit last month. She is 4 years old and very serious. She stood on her tiptoes and pressed her nose against the display case and pointed at a butter tart and said, with tremendous gravity, That one is a good choice," I told her. She looked up at me with Cynthia's eyes and said, "Grandma, did you make all of these?" "I did," I said. She considered this for a moment. Then she said, "You must be very good." I thought about all the years I spent not knowing whether I was good at anything at all. I thought about a man who had handed me an allowance and called it partnership. I thought about a $65 coat in the back of a closet and a business class I almost never took. I am," I told my granddaughter. "I really am."